Hi, guys. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the after show. It's so nice to see you. I have sent the link and I have also, I think I have pinned it, but let's take a look very quickly and make sure that it is pinned on YouTube as well. But I'll keep sending it out and about. Neo, early on, said people have been proclaiming Movado a sleeper brand for 10 years. Nobody wants Movado. Well, that's why it's still sleeping. That's why it's still sleeping. It will take a little more, maybe another 10 years to awaken it from its sleep. And I'm gonna play my part, the delusional fantasist that I am. Big Meech, delusional fantasist, thinks Movado is a desirable luxury brand. That's not the same thing as a sleeper brand. I did not say it's a desirable luxury brand. It's quite the opposite, actually. And in a way, it is the opposite of the phenomenon that we are going to observe with Breitling. Because Breitling started getting a lot of things right, because they have renewed their appeal, renewed their relevance for a new generation of customers after gaining a certain bad rep in the late 90s, early 2000s. They're now enjoying, I think, a very good spell under their new CEO, Josh Kern, who is not all that new anymore and who has started to make his mark. That means the vintage market probably is going to pick up precisely because now the models that they have in the current line have been appreciating, and inevitably, I think that brings at least some people's attention onto vintage examples in good quality, in good condition. Bowser, thank you so much for being here. Good job. You handled 200 viewers like you do 15, if not better. Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate you. Again, here, of course, I can pay more attention to each and every one of you and address every single question, everything that is said in the chat, and that's part of what makes this stream great for me, because I have a very good, loyal, committed, engaged group of supporters here, and it really is a joy to create content and to run a live stream with you all. Aiden Valento, what's up? Hey, so nice to see you as well. Corrado Galizia, it's lovely to see you. And thank you, guys, all of you. Thank you for being there at the Archie Luxury stream, helping out there, super chatting. All of it is appreciated, very much appreciated. I'll never forget, and I never forget, indeed, people who support me in one way or another. Angelic Slayer says, I missed the other stream in the studio. Hey, man, it's completely understandable. I had to make certain arrangements today to be able to start that stream at its usual time and not later. But yeah, another day. There will be more opportunities, and I appreciate having you here, Angelic Slayer. Aiden says, we love you. I love you too, guys. It's really wonderful. So how about the Movados, guys? Let's do it. I am absolutely in love with vintage Movado chronographs. And I will start with with this M90, which is a classical chronograph, 35 millimeter case. It is from 1940s. It has a Borgel case. Borgel is a company that built waterproof cases for Patek Philippe, among others, for their Calatravas and for their manual wound chronographs as well, around the same period. So one of the things that makes these kinds of vintage Movado chronographs so iconic and so desirable in their own way, though of course nowhere near a Patek Philippe, is the fact that they have the same kind of waterproof cases that are built by the same case builder in François Borgel. So when you take a look at it, this is a chronograph of classic proportions with a beautiful rice bead bracelet, stainless steel bracelet, stainless steel case, of course, in a very beautiful condition, if I might add. All the bevels and edges are incredibly well preserved, razor sharp. Those syringe hands, the domed crystal, the heat blued center seconds, continuously running seconds, and the minute counter are again beautifully done. The dial itself seems to be in a very nice condition. And this would be absolutely a watch that I would want to add to my collection, hopefully in the near future. But you can see that particular case back and really the two-part case back that seals the watch in a way that makes it, at least by the standards of the time, wartime, right, 1940s, waterproof and airtight. So it's a great piece of design. I really like the simple, if not simplistic, two-register chronograph layout, and everything in this watch to me screams classic chronograph. And again, the proportions are great too. Of course, you can wear it in the original folded link rice bead bracelet, which I think is a great look for a chronograph like this, especially if the bracelet is jingly jangly, as we like it here on this channel. Or of course you can wear it on a sporty leather strap, which brings out something else out of the watch. And you see the seller is so authentic that the vintage leather strap actually has some patina of God knows whose grease that stuck onto it. Beautiful watch. And it should really come with a clean leather strap at that price, I would say. Bowser says, are you the real Ace Frehley? Hey, you never know. People take on all sorts of names here. You never know who they are in real life. We might actually have a real rock star in the chat, and we wouldn't be wiser for it. And by rock star, I mean a real rock star, not failed middling musician who is a relapsing alcoholic and is facing a midlife crisis. Jimmy, it was a good stream. Did not particularly like Ron being a bit of dick to the prof, but hey, he's a sarcastic shithead. I think Ron means well. I think that's his particular kind of entertainment. And El Profesor has a thick skin. I'm sure he will be just fine. Thomas Broadband says, is that bracelet period consistent to the watch? Yes, to my understanding, that is the original bracelet. But yes, I will double check for you, Thomas, for sure. I will double check. Not the leather strap, but to my understanding, the bracelet is original to the watch, or so I was told. The chopped off numbers, Jake Brooks says, throws me off. Yes, that's understandable. That's understandable. I actually like it, but I know exactly what you mean. Honestly, I think it brings a very nice balance to the dial. And I like the font of those Arabic numerals as well. It just really fits with the entire vintage chronograph design. It's beautiful. Thomas says it's a keeper. Angelic says, yeah, it's nice. Crown balance to the subdials. Yeah, that's one thing they got absolutely right there, right? You know, both the size and placing of the crown, of course, plays wonderfully with the level of those two registers. Jimmy says, very nice, vintage Movado. Rolex says, sad that if you mention Movado to the average person, 99.9999% think of the museum watch. Yes, but that's also partly our gain as enthusiasts, as collectors, because believe me, if Movado did not have such a bad reputation in the current time, especially among collectors, these sorts of watches would be probably going for 2-3 times the value that they are currently. The chrono reader is nice on the outside of M90. Yes, this is one with the movement called M90, and they also have a 3-register version of it that is called M95. Let's see if they have any M95s listed on here that are in good condition. Oh, wonderful. They have like a Panda. This is an M95 Panda. Not in the sort of condition that we just saw, of course. But you can see again the movement, which is quite robust and reliable for its time, of course. Not necessarily the nicest movement we have seen, but really presents well. Again, a beautiful case, nice pushers, Super Sub C M95 with a Panda configuration from 1967. Oops. Let's see if this is this? Yeah, this is also from 1960 with a so-called snail dial, right? Because you have this particular configuration here. And this is, of course, a 3-register chronograph. Still very similar design elements, of course, but ultimately a very different vibe. Again, this is also a case produced by François Bourgel. You can already recognize the lugs, I'm sure. And really lovely watches if you find them in the good condition that we have just seen our M90 chronograph right here. Of course, again, as with everything else, condition means everything when it comes to these vintage watches as well. Again, those beautiful Borgel lugs, the M95 movement with 3 registers, 3 subdials. The same 35 millimeter waterproof case. This is a slightly different beast, but still quite appealing. BC, welcome to the channel. Jimmy says second subdial hand is very cool, a bit. Great job on the Astronic piece. Yes, Thomas, thank you for your kind words. Thank you for the comments. I will bring those up as well. A bit quirky like the Rolex Millie. Yeah, I know what you mean. You mean the minutes counter, I think. Yeah, this is the, I think this is what you mean, right? Thomas says the watch community fails to educate itself on classic and vintage Movado stretch. Thomas says, you see how Cartier, Breitling, Rolex were playing and competing in that time period. And Corrado Galizia says, is that chrono movement related to the one from the Seagull 1862? Let's check it out. Not sure if I'm familiar with that particular watch, Corrado. Let's see, what is the movement? It's ST19. We found a little piece. Oh, this looks like it's perhaps a little bit fancier. The story of this movement starts with the famous Seagull 1963 watch that was the first which received the ST19 movement. The original story goes that in the 1960s, in Switzerland, there were 3 competing chronograph movement manufacturers, Lemania, Vajou, and Venus. Venus made the popular caliber 175 column or pillar wheel chronograph that was used in several watches in the 1940s and 50s. And I think this is where the M90 and 95 comes from. Competition in this space was fierce, and Venus needed money to develop newer movements. So they first tried to sell their existing Cal 175 machinery and designs to the Soviet Union. The Soviets, however, already had the Strela chronograph movement, a copy of Venus caliber 150, which meant they weren't interested, but the Chinese were. Nice. So basically, you might be right. Perhaps they were built on the same ébauche, same movement base. It would make a lot of sense. I'll peek into it even more. Corrado, thanks for reminding me. Thanks for introducing me to this little bit of history. Bezos, hey, nice to see you back. Movado needs to step up their reissue game. Take a page from Bulova. I think so. That can help both to bring interesting, more exciting things for the watch enthusiast into their current line. And it can be also a way of drawing more attention to their own heritage. And it's very cyclical. Even Rolex finally started being a little more cognizant and playing up in their marketing their own vintage models. And they used to keep a very cold distance from it. So it's ultimately cyclical. The more people get interested in your vintage products, in your iconic models, the more they move on to the contemporary line. And the more people desire your contemporary line, aspire to acquiring watches from your contemporary line, their attention is also drawn to your heritage and to your vintage wristwatch examples. Thomas Broadband, do we know who made these movements? So M90 and M95, which were used as hand-wound chronograph movements in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Those were movements designed by Frédéric Piguet. And as you know, of course, Frédéric Piguet continued to design and supply movement bases for many prestige horological companies. P. Clen, can you give a bit of background on El Profesor? Seems like an interesting guy despite Ron the Shrink's comments. El Profesor is an economics professor. He is an industry insider, has some connections in Geneva. That's as much as I can share. Next time he appears on this channel, and trust me that he will always be an important guest for this channel, for sure. He can maybe respond to some more questions, and whatever he feels comfortable sharing, he will. Thomas says, remember, these guys are trying to drive free cash flow and wring a profit. Jimmy says, I agree, P. Clan. Ron was being childish, showing off for the chat, which were egging him on. No worries, guys. I think, I don't think El Profesor took it seriously. It was just a shtick. Rolex. Movado needs a headlining brand, though. The ownership group brands aren't what they once were. I agree. Thomas says, maybe we should interview the CEO of Movado and discuss this. That could be interesting. P. Clan says, Ron has a history of doing that to new panelists, Jimmy. And Jimmy says, yes, I know, but that was a bit too far. And Rolex says Ron should psychoanalyze himself. Guys, this is great. Thank you for being here again. I see more than 20 people, which is always an achievement for this little humble channel. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. If you have been enjoying the content, if you have been learning from it, feel free to smash that like button, help me gain more exposure. If in the meantime you want to help me grow, you can always feel free to share the link on other platforms, spread the word, tell your friends. All of that genuinely helps. If you want to join the conversation more actively, the link is pinned, and I'm going to post the StreamYard link again there. Click and join the conversation. You will be more than welcome. This is your house. And if you want to encourage me to run these streams more often, and support me in creating new and original content, consider making a PayPal contribution at lordhellespontv@gmail.com, at lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. So yes, those earlier hand-wound Movado chronograph movements, M90 for the 2-register manual wind chronograph and M95 for the 3-register manual wind chronograph, they were originally designed by Frédéric Piguet, and they were used quite extensively in Movado's chronographs in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Before we move on to how Movado and Zenith basically ended up in the same holding company as MZM, later on in a relationship and in a collaboration that lasted from 1969 to 1983, I want to share another example of vintage Movado that presents some fascinating value. There are a few nice examples here, pardon me, even listed on Chrono 24. And this will be interesting, of course, to some of us who have been following the earlier conversations on the Archie Luxury stream, because we were in the last few days looking at a lot of triple date watches, a lot of perpetual calendar watches, and here we have a piece of classic design with these teardrop slash corne de vache, cow's horns, lugs, Breguet numerals, seconds on the subdial, beautiful Dauphine hands, date indicator on the outer track, month, day, and just a wonderful piece of design and a very tasteful classic watch indeed. Again, for a dress watch, if you don't mind wearing something slightly small, again, what we have here is still a mid-size watch, right, at 35 millimeters, in decent condition, not the cleanest dial I have ever seen. There is some wear and tear on it. Nevertheless, at under $3,000 for a watch that you would actually wear, and if you are interested in this particular piece of design, it could be a great deal for someone. And there is an example in 9 carats yellow gold, if I'm not mistaken. And the dial is a little corroded, so I'm just showing it as an example. As far as I can see, the date hand, I was gonna say the date hand is missing, but yes, my bad. It's just a little corroded itself and hiding right under here, under the hour hand. But it has the same movement, of course, the same style of Breguet numerals, a little bit of a different color scheme in precious metal, but still a very interesting watch. These would be, I think, very, very good deals, especially the earlier steel example at that price range, because I think this is actually in a pretty decent condition, especially if you look at the case, the general shape of everything else. even if the dial is not impeccable, this is a very nice, wearable, and complicated vintage watch. And the movement, it says, has been professionally serviced, ready for years to come, unpolished, unusual case in perfect condition. I think that that's a very, very beautiful find. Thomas says, did you rewatch the Canelo Bivol fight? I did. Yes, I did. And obviously, I couldn't find more than 3, maybe 4 rounds to score for Canelo. I think he lost pretty decisively, and more power to Bivol. I hope Bivol gets a chance to unify with the winner of Arthur Beterbiev versus Joe Smith Jr., which is a 3-belt unification at light heavyweight at 175 pounds. Wonderful and great movement, yeah. Whether we are referring to the hand-wound chronograph movements that powered the vintage Movados, or we are referring to Dimitri Bivol's movement in the ring, I completely agree with you, Thomas. Big Meat says, I sometimes like my watches like I'm like my weekends girls, cheap, nasty, and sometimes plastic. Well, from what I can tell, from all the Instagram messages you sent me, Big Meat, I think you like them mostly plastic. Jimmy, wading into the vintage watch world, I guess having a good watch repairman is very important to make sure you're not buying a lemon or Franken. Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, this is, I completely agree. If you're interested in vintage watches, and if you're interested in style in general, if you're interested in dressing well, there are 3 things that you need to do the minute when you move into a new town. You have to find a good barber. You have to find a good alterations tailor, right? Because our bodies keep changing, and you might end up getting something new, and you want to have it adjusted to your body, maybe taken in a little bit, maybe let out a little bit, maybe have those sleeves taken out to meet your monkey arms, as I do. And you need a watchmaker, a watchmender, whatever you want to call it. You need someone who has some expertise and some experience in repairing vintage watches, and not only the average Rolex or Tag Heuer. I completely agree, Jimmy. Thanks for bringing that up and pointing it out. 49's Fine says, LMAO, Big Mac. Jimmy says, Big Mac, we used to have a lot of great strip joints here where I live, but all high-priced condos now. Gentrification. Jimmy, you know what's happening in those high-priced condos, right? The people haven't gone anywhere. It's just the strip joints that have disappeared, the gentlemen's clubs, so to speak. Never was the word so misplaced. J617, Big Mac, you need to bet the farm on RCI Hospitality. Who knows the fine art of contemporary dance better than you? Nobody. Amazing. Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of like this. I'm so tempted to just pull the trigger right now and get this watch, honestly. I love the design. I love the complication. I just think it's a beautiful piece. And of course, the first thing you would do with something like this is to make sure that they have some sort of return policy. Of course, this might be more trouble than it's worth for a watch that's actually in the Netherlands. And you kind of have to have to make sure that everything is all right, that everything is original parts as they promised here, that the case is in the condition that they have described, that the dial looks pretty much like how it looks and shows in the pictures, right? Because sometimes there are photos taken only from certain angles to hide a more outrageous blemish. Hey, in either case, I think Jimmy has his finger on the pulse there. That's thank you for reminding us of that. And I thought this was, for whatever reason, I thought this was a stainless steel watch, but I guess again, it comes down to the pictures. This is actually a yellow gold as well, or so it says in the description. I would have to write to them and confirm. In either case, speaking of plastic, of course, this is a beautiful domed plastic crystal, which only adds to the wonderful aesthetic appeal of the watch. I love that big crown that almost sits flush to that case. Great proportions, great design, and I'm sure thanks to those Comte de Vache cow's horns design, it probably has even more presence than it shows there. Jake Brooks, Mike didn't say root beer for all the show. I was hoping. Yeah, I'm glad no one really brought it up, because I feel like, Mike is sometimes really getting hurt by some of the comments and some of the questions. He's not taking it well sometimes, and I worry once every so often. But I hope he's just saying that rather than anything else. Jimmy says acrylic or plastic makes for great distortion. Yeah, I think that's half the charm of a lot of the older Rolexes for me. The domed tropic crystals for the divers, whether we're talking about submariners or sea dwellers vintage, or the top hat crystals that you have for older GMTs. I think those just create very unique, and to me, infinitely more desirable aesthetics that you can't really find in a modern watch. Just impossible. I'm trying to find if I have right here a picture of my sub at the right angle. Yeah. Let's see, share. Yeah, you see? Love it. Yeah, you catch it from a certain angle, it's either distorted or completely gone. And this is like this is a domed crystal, but not the super dome that they used to have on 60s and 70s sea dwellers. But I do have acquired one of those crystals, and certainly next time this goes to my watchmaker for just the regular service and maintenance, it will get that super dome crystal. I look forward to it. Thomas Broadband says hunt for the chrono. Yeah, I actually agree. Yeah, between the Movado 2-register chrono that we checked out from the 1940s and the triple calendar that we just took a look at, I think the chrono is to me a little more desirable, even though it's a little more expensive. Jimmy says, is it true toothpaste works for taking out scratches? I know Watch Poly works. Yeah, Watch Poly certainly works, but so does toothpaste. Just get some plain toothpaste, right? I don't really mind actually a lot of the swirls on the on an acrylic crystal. I think again it adds to that vintage charm, right? It adds to that distortion effect. It makes everything seem a little warmer. But when it comes to like genuine scratches, most of anything, could be basically cleaned out and buffed out, I should say, with just a tiny little dab of plain, simple toothpaste that you apply in circular motions to the acrylic crystal. And then you simply wipe it off with a little rag, maybe like something you cut from an old shirt, and it works just fine. Jimmy says, yes, it is a very cool effect. Thomas Broadband says, LHV, be a good ref and was a good ref and put a halt to the dirty below the banter. Yeah, I tried my best. I tried my best to play the moderator. So the next watch that I will take a look at is something that I did a short video on earlier in the day. And I call this one the Forgotten Integrated Steel Sports Watch of the 1970s. And it is a product of the merger between Movado and Zenith. And as Thomas Broadband mentioned before in this chat, and as he also commented below the video, after you watch the video, please do read his comment as well. Movado basically saved Zenith in late 60s and 70s, and they were held by the same company, MZM, from 1969 to 1983, and they collaborated quite extensively, exchanging and trading parts and movements between each other, and especially in the US market, since Zenith was already involved in a trademark battle with the TV company. A lot of times they preferred to market the Movado models, and this is something that is called Astronic HS360. It's the equal of another vintage model from the same time period called Zenith Espada. And it is basically the most decorated, most complicated version of the Zenith El Primero movement that you can see right here. And it is, of course, the predecessor, basically, to Caliber 400, which for a dozen years powered the Rolex Daytona between 1988 to 2000. One of the first automatic chronograph movements. Oh, Mitch is here. Hey, Big Mitch, how are you?
What's going on, Lord?
Nice to see you, man. Welcome back.
Yeah. Always a pleasure to be in the presence of the Lord, Lord Helipont.
Helipods. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, man. That's very generous of you. Nice to see you as well.
So
Yes.
I'm kind of
So
curious, Lord, would you actually buy a Movado, a vintage Movado, or would you? How do I say this? Let me. Would you buy one over 5,000? That's the better question. Or would you just not even bother touching it?
I think I would. I really want a precious metal watch next. That's my main um, that's my current aspiration, right? So as much as I like, especially the integrated bracelet watch from the 70s, the Astronic HS360 with the 3019 movement.
Okay.
Um, I think I would love one of these, but as it happens, I really want a precious metal dress watch next. So this will have to wait. And it's not such a bad thing because I feel that a lot of this stuff will come down in the short term, uh, a little bit at least.
Hmm.
Jimmy says, "Wow, the Astronic is really nice. Must confess, had no idea this existed. It kind of reminds me of the case shape. It kind of reminds me of the Zenith Revival chronograph, um, which is of course no coincidence because Zenith carries on this legacy better than Movado does at this point in time. Um, but yeah, Jimmy says, "Ouch, 9K Canadian for this Movado, too high." It's a little bit high. I think I would. You could make a move for 7K Canadian, perhaps. I would try to see how they fare, until the end of the year. Honestly, Jimmy, before I make a move, if you are serious about getting one, unless money is no object, in which case I think you should grab one you see in great condition and just forget about it. Thomas Broadband says always wanted to count the jewels to see if they actually limited to 17 jewels or just labeled it in that way to avoid the watch luxury import tax. That's an interesting question, Thomas, and I know exactly why you're asking it because the same movement that powers that Movado, Zenith El Primero, um, 3019 PHF, um, also powers Zenith Espada that you can see here, which is just a marginally different watch. A few cosmetic differences, such as the index markers that are a little um, unique in the Zenith. The Zenith version has a movement that has 31 jewels. But yeah, I don't quite know whether that's an actual count, Thomas. I think that's a very interesting question. I'm trying to see if this has an example where the movement is open. Are you outside?
Oh no. I'm currently driving to get some lunch here.
Okay, lunch. It's a little late for lunch, no?
I no, I'm usually nocturnal.
Hmm. Thomas says the Movado is more handsome. Somehow, I think uh, I think like that too. Um, but again, the price difference mostly, Thomas, is because of how Movado trends in the current market and how it's perceived as a brand currently. That's why they are cheaper. I think the jewel count in the movement really doesn't matter all that much, even for the most committed watch enthusiast. I don't think it makes a great deal of difference. So, what is your sleeper brand, Big Meech? What do you think is a brand that will gain in value, being undervalued currently?
It's a good question. I'm going to stick with Monta on this one. I technically, yes, they are a micro brand, but I feel like they're highly underrated.
Wait, what brand you said?
Monta.
Say what?
So it's Monta, Monta.
Okay, let me pull up something. Where are they made?
I couldn't tell you. I think they're American based. I could be wrong. They're either American based or partially Switzerland based. I can't remember.
I think they are based in the US but made in Switzerland, maybe?
Could be.
And what do you particularly like about this brand?
They're actually pretty. How do I say this? Not to sound cliche, but they actually are a combo meal deal type thing. Hunger Buster. I believe they're ETA. I believe they have ETAs mostly, but I think they have a couple in houses as well. I could be wrong on that as well here, but overall, I like their designs. If anything, they're very similar but yet different. Um, if that makes sense.
Like they're recognizable as designs, but
Yeah, yeah. So Monta just did a announcement here that they're going to be releasing an exclusive line, 100 pieces of the Sky Quest, I believe it is. So 50 of them are going to be candy pink, and then the other 50 are going to be Tiffany blue. Um, which I know is kind of fucking hilarious because they came out on their Instagram and said, guys, we're not trying to copy, we're not trying to be, we're not trying to keep up with the watch industry. We were planning this well before all this, and I think obviously it's a load of bullshit. Honestly, we
of
all
course.
know that they're trying to keep up, but they've actually they've actually done it very well, honestly, and they're doing it as a limited edition, which is even better. I mean, how they're doing a better limited edition quality control than, say, Omega, Grand Seiko. You get the picture.
Well,
So
they're not exactly cheap, are they?
they are not, no. And some of them are. So you get a glide lock clasp on their divers, which is for $1,200 or $2,400, excuse me. Um,
Mhm.
that's actually kind of a steal of a deal, honestly, in my opinion. Or maybe not a deal, honestly, but it's nice that they made it standard. There we go. That's the better choice of words. Um, they just came out with the GMT. They're doing another run of GMTs as well, but they came out with this kind of a gilt style, almost like a Tudor like vibe. I believe they only did 200 pieces of those, and they sold out within 16 minutes. So they got a pretty well committed fan base, and I believe I don't know. I just give them time, and I think you'll see them in the same at the same table as Tag Heuer if they're not there already. They've certainly surpassed Longines. Uh, I
Mhm.
think I think if you're for a little bit of value, I think they're a good place to look.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I had never heard of them before. And you said the movements are ETA?
I think overall most of them are ETA, but I don't know. They might have an in-house sneaking around in there somewhere.
Hmm. All right. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know if I could vouch for this because I don't know anything about this brand. Um, and they seem to be in the segment that maybe Oris occupied before. Um, but yeah, that's quite a tall ask, if you ask me, for them to overtake, Longines and Tag and brands like that. It's interesting. I
I
mean,
mean, I'm with Archie on this one. What's special about Longines? It's nothing. It's not a special watch. It used to be a special watch. And Tag Heuer is not much better, to be frank. But I mean, yeah, I'm kind of with Archie. There's there's nothing really particularly special about a Longines, and maybe that's why they have such a great fan base is because they're easy and they're fairly cheap and affordable. Maybe that's what makes them so special to some.
hmm. I'm going to read some of the chats. Thomas says, I've owned Movado Astronic for 6 years. That's a really nice watch. I wonder why you got out of it, Thomas, if you don't mind sharing that. Surprised you like these, Joe. Sort of shitter category, Jimmy says, for the Monta. Surpassed Longines? No way. I would rather go with an Oris or Zin.
Ugh, I hate Sims.
Longines and Tag have a pedigree. History, this does not. Jimmy says again. Thomas says, thanks, truly a marvel for its time, Astronic. Great story, led the way, hand to hand, fighting the courts, fighting for survival, like Patton rescuing the Lipizan stallions in Austria, World War II. Yeah, that was a very difficult time for the watch industry, for sure, the 70s. And I'm glad Movado and Zenith played their part. I still have it, my favorite keeper. Okay, good, Thomas. I was so worried when you said you have owned it for 6 years. I thought maybe you owned it for 6 years and then moved on. I'm very happy that you still have it. Cherish it, wear it, love it as you do. Wear it in good health. So, what are you getting for lunch, Big Meat?
Cheap, nasty, and vicious gas station food.
Gas station.
So, yeah, rest in
What?
peace to my toilet tonight. But I want to go back to the comment of Longines and Tag Heuer having pedigree and heritage. First off, that's a pretty small pedigree and heritage bar right there. Let's be frank. And to be honest, if you're looking at Tag Heuer doesn't really have that much pedigree and heritage. I mean, I get if you're lumping Heuer into the group, but to me, Heuer and Tag are two different groups. Heuer is a prestigious brand, where Tag Heuers are shitters, with cheap and nasty plastic parts in them. Longines, yeah, I mean, yeah, technically, yeah, they're one of the greatest watches used to be way back in the 1800s. But they used to be more desirable than Patek Philippe. But now, what's left of them? They're a ghost of themselves. Until Longines actually starts doing a lot more, in-house movements. Um, kind of breaking away from like the cheap mall-looking watch type designs. They're on the right path. I mean, their designs are getting a little bit better, but there's no value for money there, in my opinion. For ETAs, I think you're paying way too much on them. And I get that's ironic considering when you compare them to Monta, but still. With Monta, it makes sense because they're a micro brand. Longines is supposed to be this prestigious brand. And they don't come off it as like that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't necessarily disagree about what you said about Hoya and Tag having really two distinct pedigrees. Because what Tag did after acquiring Hoya is not necessarily always in line with, and not necessarily at the same level as Hoya, which was, especially for its chronographs, a very respectable brand. Um, but yeah, I think, as much as I think that since the 90s, Tag Heuer has been in a very strange kind of slump while being incredibly successful commercially, of course. I have to say, I disagree with what you have to say about Longines, because Longines does have the pedigree, and I don't care if it's back in the 18th century. It really isn't. Longines was quite respectable for most of the 20th century as well. But of course, they're in the uncomfortable position of being owned among many other watch brands and companies by a luxury conglomerate, and inevitably they market them to different segments of customers. There's Tissot, there's Longines, and then there's Omega. So they have a certain high ceiling that they can never really cross, right? They're not even allowed, I think, by the Swatch Group to compete with.
And that's a shame. That's a shame. Knowing that you could potentially go back to what you once were, but your overlords want you to be a shitter brand.
And I mean, the Pontiff actually has a very specific case against Longines, in that someone that he really hates has an entire collection of Longines, so he hates the brand along with that. So Thomas says Jack Hoya was the newer Wirstoff. These guys sold, they were setting trends, and then they adapted. Yeah, from leaders to followers, which is a shame. Jimmy says Longines and Tag have both moved towards their heritage, which is actually true, even for Tag, and put out nice looking watches as of late. They're falling back on that heritage, which gives them edge, in my humble opinion. Jay says, Big Mac, you need a consulting gig at RCI Hospitality. They're making major gains in the market. It will fund you into becoming an adult and buying your first Patek Philippe. Thomas, they got crushed. Quartz, economy. Tag was the watch that you got because the two-tone looked like a Rolex.
I still think it is kind of the brand that you buy Tag Heuer when you can't afford Tudor.
I mean, they're more or less they're more or less valued at the same segment. That's why I kind of am uncomfortable with Tag, because again, why wouldn't you get a Tudor at that?
Well, you can get
right?
an in-house movement, right? For a Tudor, yeah, you can get it in the 58, right?
Yeah, and it's only separated from it at most by a few $100.
1,000 at most. But the Tag Heuer gets more of an edge as far as with civilians. Civilians recognize the word Tag Heuer more than they'll ever recognize Tudor.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that for sure.
Like I said, Heuer themselves, I like Heuer. I got nothing against Heuer. It used to sit at the same table as Rolex and Omega for a period of time. And to see him be, kind of in the same loophole as Longines, a former shell of themselves, is kind of depressing.
Hey guys, we just passed the hour mark. So if you have been enjoying the conversation, if you have been learning from it, please hit that like button, upvote the stream. Every vote counts. It helps me gain more exposure. And it's really pushing me forward in my quest to reach 1,000 subs. So that's very much appreciated. It's invaluable that you spread the word, share the link on other platforms, and help me expand this platform and get it monetized sooner than later. And in the meantime, if you want to support me, if you want to encourage me in running these live streams, creating more original content, more informative content, pointing out the overlooked brands, the undervalued brands, giving you certain histories of the brands of particular models. If you want to encourage me in doing that, you can always consider a PayPal contribution. And that's lordhellespontv@gmail.com, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. And I also have a Cash App because I set up a clogged toilet fund that Big Meech always contributes. That is $LHVVV, $LHVVV.
Send money now.
Indeed. Mac, what else can you ask for? It's the corporate Bing. Thomas says the historic vintage Longines was the Cartier competition. Jimmy says, just to be clear, I like the Hoya tags that have done racing chrono reissues. Yeah, I do like that that tag has done these reissues, including the Monaco with the Gulf stripes as well, and have an in-house movement for sure. Pardon me. And Thomas says Hoya was a third of the cost of a Rolex dive watch. Yes, of course, that is a major concern for most. And you're in a way right, Big Meech, right? In the 1990s, we didn't have these micro brands. We didn't have these, more affordable independents that were still produced in Switzerland, maybe with generic movements for sure. Maybe not with, not with any superior finishing or a lot of handwork at all, or any particular kind of horological attention. But yeah, now we have, instead of tag, to serve the purpose that a lot of tag aqua racers, for example, or link watches served in the 90s, we have micro brands like Monta. Perhaps you're right.
Yeah. I will be right back. Give me like 10 minutes. I gotta go get my junk food.
Of course, please enjoy it. Enjoy it. I'll be right here. Hey guys, so we are continuing our quest for sleeper brands, and feel free to chime in from the chat. It can be a contemporary brand, a micro brand, or an independent that you think is somehow overlooked. Or it can be a vintage brand, even a specific model that you think is undervalued in one way or another. So if you would like to share your pick of sleeper brands from the chat, feel free. The link is there, pinned. Feel free to jump on. I posted it again, but it was already pinned. SP, welcome back to the channel. It's so nice to see you. Thomas Broadband says, watches are now heavy money. Popping by on my lunch break. Thank you for sharing your lunch break with us. Jimmy says, pull up Altavia Chronograph Panda and tell me what you think. You have in mind the reissue, of course. Jimmy, I think, look, I will start by at this patinated vintage example, and then we will move back from that to the reissue. And it will give you an idea, I think, about what I actually like about them. This is vintage Altavia. You can see it from the good, honest, worn condition of the bezel insert, of course. And you can see it also from the coffee, light brown color that the subdials have taken on through aging as well. And I think it's a nice look. Of course, you can find them in a slightly better condition, and they actually run for quite a hefty amount usually in the vintage market, especially if they have a sharp, clean case, and somehow also have a clean dial, right? If you see this example, for instance, you have an even cleaner dial, a better bezel, much better preserved, and you can see that it fetches even bigger prices. But let's look at the Altavia reissue that Tag did in recent times. Let me know if this is the one you're looking for. I think it's already discontinued. This is a 3-register one, with the dates at 6 o'clock, which I think is not a bad execution actually for that aperture. Yeah, that is the Mario Andretti that I just showed Jay. Let's see, the Jack Oya Altavia. Yeah, these were from a few years back, weren't they, Jimmy? The Jack Hoya limited reissue. Yeah, with that rice bead, 5-link bezel, Panda. Yeah, it's a very handsome watch, and I think you can still find some of these in the secondary market, and they're not too crazy, I think. Right around 5K, basically. And they have the Hoya O2 chronograph movement in them. Yeah, these are very nice watches. I think, I wouldn't mind owning a vintage example for sure. I would love to see how these newer ones actually sit on the wrist, because they're significantly bigger compared to something like this, which is right under 40 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more like a 39. Whereas the reissues are 42, 43, something like that. But of course, these fetch a big premium in the secondary market already, the vintage versions. So the reissue is always a good option when that is the case. Yeah. John Goldberger, of course, recently collaborated on a book that explores the connections between horology and racing. That's called Time to Race. And Jay reminds us that he has there some very good pictures um, of the vintage Hoya Altavias. Thomas says, sleeper Patek 5940, especially platinum, compared within the brand and given secondary market, look at retail prices too. I see 20% below MSRP coming to the pre-owned market. Let's check it out. 5940.
Pull it up, Lord.
Yes, these are the TV case perpetual calendars. Absolutely. They are, again, for a Patek perpetual calendar. These are sleepers. You might call them even a good deal. But of course, see, for example, in white gold, wait, they don't have any pictures here. Let me find an example where they have good enough pictures. Interesting. Okay, they are one in yellow gold, listed right around 50,000. Thomas Broadbent. And this is yellow gold, TV case, TV sets, Patek perpetual calendar, Breguet numerals, leaf hands or fairy hands, of course, the beautiful moon phase, month, leap year indicator, day, date. Yeah, and relatively speaking, compared to round case perpetual calendars that Patek has, that is even more desirable. This is certainly a relative bargain. This should be the platinum version. No, that's white gold. Let's see. Let's look for 5940. They have a 5940p. Let's see. G. Maybe this is P. A lot of, yeah, Thomas, sorry. A lot of the listings on Chrono 24 for these kinds of watches can be stock images. So I'm not going to waste too much time, but the point is well taken. Yes, in that TV set shaped case, the perpetual calendars are a relative deal. Jimmy says, I think it's a column wheel too, if I'm not mistaken, the house movement. So let's take a look. Hoya 02 is it a column wheel movement? Honestly, yes, it is a self-winding movement with column wheel operated chronograph based on the original CH80 1969 plans. Yeah, cool. Thomas says, yes, the new reissues, the TAC Hoya reissues are big. Jimmy says, yeah, the fact that the reissue is bigger is a downside. Jay is laughing. Big Me says, fight me dead, my connection. Hey, man, get back in here once your connection is better or once you make the way back home. And we have, of course, the link pinned here, and I'm posting it a few more times. And certainly, that's those are a few more relative bargains. Okay, so those were not those are those were not what you were looking for. 5960 is actually what you were looking for. Oh, SP had recommended IWC Perpetual Calendar Pilot. IWC's extremely deals. Oftentimes, the those two brands, IWC and Jaeger LeCoultre, have done quite a bit in the 80s and especially in the 90s in bringing, these sorts of grand complications in um, in steel cases, and really in relatively affordable versions, right? They really opened the gates, so to speak, in making available these sorts of prestige complications in non-precious metal cases, and that tradition still continues, and it mostly grew out of Günther Blümlein's efforts to democratize the complications and Kurt Klaus's designs of some of these uh, trademark movements for IWC perpetual calendar, especially. And otherwise, we were looking at 5960. Let's see that 5960. Oh, well, I mean, this is, yeah. Look, I don't disagree necessarily, Thomas, but I wouldn't call these really sleepers, because this annual calendar chronograph by Patek, when it was actually still part of the line, especially in steel, was extremely desirable. And like you said, maybe in compared to how the steel is trending in the secondary market, perhaps the platinum version, uh, the versions that are executed in other precious metals, in various shades of gold, those might end up being relatively good deals. But I think it's, I wouldn't necessarily call it sleeper. Newbie, hi Lord, I just tried the toothpaste trick and emailed you the pics. It did work a little on an extreme example. Wow, good. That's good to hear. The usual swirls, etc. Um, it really works a great deal. And yeah, let's see. I'm gonna download the pictures so I don't in any way risk disclosing any of your information. And trust me, I mean, if you have, of course, the so-called professional product, Polywatch can make it a little easier on you. But when it comes to a quick little cleanup that you might use as a home cooked method, you see this is this beautiful Speedmaster covered in the goo of fresh basic toothpaste. And then we have right here the before and after pictures. I think there's still some residue of of toothpaste to rub off. But yeah, it looks much less severe in the second example. And for a quick try, that's not bad at all. And that's really heavily scratched crystal. Again, not that it's a bad thing, right? That's how acrylic crystals are. They don't take the smudge and grease and thumbprints like the sapphire crystals do, but they do get scratched a little easier. So you just have to keep them in check and try to keep them as clean as possible by regular cleaning. Once the scratches get too deep, it becomes a little more difficult. Jimmy says, that's very nice. That's cool. MCM says, thanks for keeping it classy on Archie. Meeting up with Mike the Snake tomorrow. Gonna let him check out an MBNF. Wow, it will blow his mind, probably. That's a very different kind of watch than what he usually is interested in and what constitutes his collection. So yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that you guys are meeting up in real life, and thank you so much for your kind words. It really means a lot, MCM. Thank you. Jimmy says, that's a much loved Speedy. Awesome. I think, yeah, the vintage Speedies have irresistible appeal to me. Thomas Broadband, the comments earlier tonight that JLC can't hang with Patek, Vacheron Constantin, and AP needed clarification. Certain models by Gégé Lecoutre can stand alone with Patek and VC. JLC is always on the table. That's my position, but it really depends, Thomas, on what you are looking in a brand. Of course, if you want hand-finished, high horological movements, I think, in fact, you should go all the way to Glashütte and acquire one of those Datox, I think, which are really works of real architecture and artisanship. Whereas if you're looking for respectable complications and sometimes grand complications, very well executed in stainless steel cases, and oftentimes in their ultra-thin forms, JLC offers a great deal. And I think your options are both in terms of quantity. Well, in terms of quantity, they're much more extensive than what you can get from Patek or Vacheron or Audemars Piguet when it comes to complicated watches cased in stainless steel. And certainly when you look at the quality, other than the fact that the movements are mostly machine finished, price performance ratio, I think, in fact, beats most of what you can find from Patek, from Vacheron, from Audemars Piguet. Simply because anything in stainless steel with complicated movements from those companies would be almost a one of a kind, right? Certainly a special order watch that would come with an incredible premium. So if you're looking for a more robust and reliable daily wear, something that has the horological pedigree, but that is more affordable, you're right. JLC sits at the table, as does certain models from IWC's heritage. But certainly JLC, when it comes to the secondary market, especially, we have already seen how you can get that ultra thin master perpetual calendar for well under the list price. It's an incredible steal, and I know one of our friends in the chats was going to the boutique earlier today, to check out one of the um, master control dates, the new Blue Dial 30th anniversary one. So I hope he gets it. I hope he likes it, and maybe he can share some of it with us. As we have just reached the halfway mark, I would really appreciate it if you click the like and upvote the stream. It really helps me. It helps me gain more exposure. And if you want to, in fact, help me more in that regard, and help me reach 1,000 subscribers, please share the link to this channel on other platforms, on other social media accounts you have. Every little bit helps. Even if I were to gain one subscriber, that would be invaluable to me. And it actually means a lot to me, because I really interact with each and every one of you, respond to all the comments, and it's really, for me, one of the most important things about this channel, that we can have this committed, engaged group of supporters. It means the world to me. But in the meantime, while I'm still making my way to monetization, I would appreciate it if you could consider a PayPal contribution. And for that, the account is lordhellespontv@gmail.com, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. And yes, thank you, Newbie, for sharing those before and after shots of the Speedmaster and the Hesselite crystal. It looks like a great watch, and it looks like it has been well loved and well appreciated. And I look forward to hearing more from you, MCM, and especially about how Mike likes NBNF watches. Pardon me. And I certainly agree with you, Thomas, that Jaeger LeCoultre is very much an underrated brand still, and quite undervalued in the secondary market too. And selfishly, I hope it remains that way. I hope if JLC is a sleeper brand, I hope no one really awakens it from its sleep. And I hope we can continue to get some great deals in especially stainless steel, complicated watches, and even reversos in precious metals, with ultra thin movements, so on and so forth. It's really a great brand with the right pedigree, with every bit of history as any other major watchmaker from Switzerland. And I think finally they are kind of reclaiming their place, I have to say, within that Richemont group of watchmakers. Of course, unsurprisingly, Vacheron Constantin and Alain Gonzone, IWC, also belong to this same group, as does Cartier, as it happens. Newbie says, cheers, Jimmy. Yes, guys, we're continuing the conversation on our favorite sleeper brands, our favorite undervalued models among vintage watches. Share with me if there is a brand that you have in mind that is actually undervalued or overlooked in today's watch market. I think there's something about independent makers coming from different parts of the world, quite honestly. Of course, we know that there are by now many independents from Switzerland that have been emerging for quite some time now. We have, of course, mentioned earlier in Archie's stream Laurent Ferrier. We have mentioned Chapek. We have mentioned Romain Gauthier. Of course, there are so many other brands coming out of Germany as well, right? There is Dornblut und Sohn. There is Moritz Gossmann, that's Bondage and Discipline mentioned as well. And, finally, we have this idea that Switzerland and Germany have already an established pedigree and history over the years, and Germany also really made strides in reclaiming some of that heritage and reinventing it for the contemporary world quite a bit. Newbie says, by the way, yes, before we get to that, Thomas, the warmth, feel, touch of the Hasselite acrylic plastic crystals is very special. I love the memories of this style. I cannot but agree, Thomas. It's really, really nice. And yeah, those plastic crystals are really, to me, they're most of what makes vintage watches so special, right? After all, there's a reason that we call the dials of these watches a face. And that's the part of the watch that you interact with most during the day. And how it looks, and the warmth that these acrylic crystals give to it really add to that look. That's the most important part, right? That plays a huge role in how you relate to that watch, in how whether that watch sings to you or not. It really depends on that. Newbie says, I bought the Speedy for £400 sterling. It needs a service and new end links. In the pic, the chrono hand resets to the 9-second position. Should still work out as a decent investment. It's 40 years old next year. Yeah, that sounds like a very good investment indeed, Newbie. I'm very happy to hear that. I think after the service, it'll be good as new, and you'll have a great daily wear for sure. But hey, if you are thinking of it as an investment bought at that price, you can't go wrong, as Jimmy said. With a good service, still way ahead of the game. Nice pickup. Yeah, honestly, of course, the pre-moon and 70s speedies have been picking up in value for the longest time. But of course, when it comes to the 80s Speedmasters, I think they have been on the rise too more recently. So I think a lot of times, especially if they're in decent condition, you would be lucky to find them at 4K pounds sterling at this point. So you got yourself a great deal there, really a steal, I should say, because the servicing, I'm sure it will be not too complicated after all. And that brings me to yet another segment kind of watches which are undervalued. And that's that's really the Breitling Navitimers from the 70s and 80s especially. But I think we can add the 60s as well. Because after all, when you think of chronograph movements with great pedigree, obviously, what comes to mind is the Rolex Daytona. What comes to mind is the Omega Speedmaster. But Breitling Navitimer basically had its reign right around the same era. And we have talked a little bit about this yesterday, but certainly we can make a case for vintage Breitling Navitimers that are sooner or later going to enjoy some more attention and going to be valued in a more intense and exclusive way. We were looking, you would remember from yesterday, at an example that was supposedly issued for the Jordanian Air Force and was sold by a vintage watch dealer from New York. And here you have Breitling Navitimer 7740 with the crest of Hussein I on the back. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the Navitimer myself, but I think an example of a vintage Navitimer in good condition can always fetch something interesting in terms of value in mid to long term. Because ultimately, guys, with the Rolexes and Omegas, with the Daytonas and Speedmasters, at some point, and this is already the case in a way, the watches in impeccable conditions are becoming harder and harder to find. So inevitably, at least some people are going to move on to something else. And with Breitling really regaining some of the reputation and some of the good name that they had seemingly lost over the last decade and even for some part of the 90s as well. You can only imagine that they will be valued more and more as time goes on. A lot of fantastic watches and a lot of great deals to be had if you are a fan of the Breitling Navitimer. MCM says early 2000s speak Marin when Peter ran a small workshop are very well made, still represent solid value from an iconic modern watchmaker. Yes, nowadays they're of course bought by the Swiss. I think the owners are Swiss. At any rate, it's made in Switzerland, of course. Highly modified, hand finished ETA movements. Let's see how they run the secondary market, um, if we can find any examples in our Bible, so to speak, in Chrono 24. Now, excuse my ignorance, MCM, but can you tell me when this period exactly was? Do you know when the UK-based founder of the company actually sold it? So I will return to that. Jimmy says, another great vintage piece, this Breitling, as is the reissue. Yeah. Bert K says, doesn't Zinn have a license to produce a version of the Navitimer? Yes, Bert, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I have to be honest with you, I don't exactly know the history or the story behind that acquisition. I don't know how they use it. So I'll see. I'll look into it as a future question. Yeah. And by the way, newbie, thank you for making that contact. I genuinely appreciate it. Let's see if something comes out of it. I would most certainly love to collaborate. Yeah, speak Marin. I mean, nowadays I find it to be extremely overpriced. Of course, they have jumped on the bandwagon for an integrated bracelet sports watch that costs an arm and a leg. This particular piece, I think it's called Ripples. What is it? Yeah. So that kind of put me off. But of course, that doesn't do any justice to how the brand was initially founded and how it actually arrived at this particular point in time. Jay says, upvote and subscribe, Fikers. Thank you, Jay. Thank you for your support. I appreciate you. Thomas says, independent watchmakers, positive personas are so important to me. Laurent Ferrier, engineering, collaborative design, and execution shines of the passion and smiles. Yeah. Again, Laurent Ferrier is already quite highly rated. And I'm saying this not necessarily as a personal value judgment, but more as a recognition of the segment to which Laurent Ferrier appeals and aspires. Certainly, you're talking about a watch that costs $50,000, but I find it to be a beautiful piece of design in terms of reinterpreting the vintage cushion case for a new century, so to speak. And of course, the movements themselves are a work of art, even in terms of the different colors you get to see here, in terms of the Geneva waves, the snailing on the micro rotor, and all these blackened, screws the rubies. It's really amazing. I mean, the black and balanced conch as well. It's hard to find anything to fuss about. Of course, they have a more classic version as well of their timepiece. Something again with a similar automatic movement, with the same, I should say, honestly. It's decorated a little differently, but I think it's for the most part the same. And they also have manual wound version of their dress watch, which is 40 millimeters, 31,000 Swiss francs. And, you know, the sporting heritage of their founder is oftentimes expressed in the grade 5 titanium they use across the range, and not only in their sports watch. And of course, his horological pedigree is expressed in the design and decoration of the movements. Because of the price point, it's really hard to call it again a sleeper in earnest, because they are already quite highly valued. But that being said, I think because of the exclusivity, there is always the possibility of it going for even higher prices in the future. Who knows? Maybe if we are patient enough, and if we are ourselves surviving this moment of economic crisis, and if we can pull through, maybe there will be some deals in the secondary market for some of these as well. I'm not talking about steals, but hey, I remember the times that Chronomètre Bleu was trending under retail in the secondary market. So it's never say never. Who could actually tell that FP Jaune would become what it is today? There weren't many, honestly. There weren't many who had foreseen that sort of future. So we can certainly see also the inverse side, the twist of fate in the other direction as well. And that could be the right moment, perhaps, for us or for some of us to pick up one of these brands in a way that wasn't really possible before. Yeah, their sports watch I'm really not in love with, I have to say. I like what they have for their more classical design, even though again you have a really beautiful movement here. The cutouts, on the micro rotor, the perlage that's done, pardon me, at different levels and frequencies. Everything really screams quality and handwork. But ultimately, again, the watch has to sing to you, and I can't say that about this particular piece of design. It just doesn't do it for me. Thomas says, yes, put money aside. MCM says, yes, it's a joke now for Speak Marine. Speak Marin, maybe. I think that's how they pronounce it. And Peter has nothing to do with the brand. His best pieces were 2000-ish to 2008, 38 millimeter Piccadilly case, thick enamel dials. He did a tourbillon that Max Busa, Harry Winston used. Yeah, now let's check it out. Maybe I do remember that I saw a Piccadilly on Chrono 24 MCM. So maybe we will. I wonder if this is from that particular period. I'm not sure if it specifies the date. I hope it is. So Speak Marin Spirits. It doesn't say Geneva on the dial, so that's encouraging. So maybe it is from that period. Again, the design is not really my thing. At least the design on the dial. I do appreciate the aesthetics of the case, right? Anything that looks like pocket watch converted into a wristwatch, to me has almost immediate appeal, visually at least. But yeah, the dial doesn't really speak to me, no pun intended. But if this is in fact from the period that you're speaking of, probably it could be a good deal. The seller also accepts offers, so it can be an option. Jake Brooks says, do you like Breitling BO1 Premier? I do, yeah. I think, I like a lot of um, those vintage inspired or newer designs also from Breitling chronographs. I like them, with all due respect again, I like them much more than Navitimers, honestly. I think again, it gets a lot of things right. Of course, Panda chronograph, 2 or 3 subdials, it's all the rage. So you can't go wrong with that in this market. But I don't necessarily mind that Breitling participates in that as well. They have every right to, since, especially because they hold their own whenever we speak of chronograph with pedigree, right? You have to mention Breitling in the same breath as Rolex, as Omega, as Hoya that we talked about, right? So I like the Premier series overall, and I like the BO1. I think if I were to go for one of these, I would probably go for their heritage-inspired ones. Maybe like this one, the B15 duograph in stainless steel, or maybe one that has a 40 millimeter case, perhaps this pistachio green dial with the Arabic numbers. And of course, you can already see it, right, JB? It's exactly the same dial design, except of course this is a much more rounded case as that vintage Movado chronograph that I was showing. Of course, that's also a smaller watch, most certainly. But you can already see why this appeals to me. I think that's fantastic. MCM says that Speak Marin Piccadilly that I showed is after his sweet spot. But yeah, but it's that case shape that you meant. I'm assuming, MCM. Please do confirm that. But thank you for drawing our attention to a brand that we don't, right? I think the only time I heard Speak Marin really pop up in conversation in the Archieverse was when we were talking about the new releases from Watches and Wonders and their Ripples, the integrated bracelet steel sports watch came up in conversation, and I wasn't really intrigued in any strong sense. Guys, the link is pinned, and I'm posting it a few more times in the chat as well. Please join the conversation. You are more than welcome. This is your home. And we are now just past the 2-hour mark. If you have been enjoying the content, if you have been learning from it, please upvote, hit the like button. It helps me gain more exposure. It really pushes me that much closer to 1,000 members. And this channel has come leaps and bounds in the last few months, but we are now in that, we're closing in on that last stretch where I am almost there in terms of monetization. So this last push is really important for me. Spread the word, tell your friends, share the link on other platforms. I need all the eyes that I can get as I am creating new content for the channel. There are a few more videos to come up before the end of the week, so keep your eyes peeled. And if you want to encourage me in the meantime, before I get monetized, so I can run more of these live streams, so I can create more original content, you can always consider a PayPal contribution, and my address is lordhellespontv@gmail.com. That's lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support and presence from the chat. And thank you for also jumping on the panel once every so often and helping me generate more content. It's always better to have something interactive, something more dynamic with a co-host, with an interlocutor. But you already know that I do a decent job in running the stream on my own as well. With that, I will ask for your permission for 1 second because I really need a drink of water, but I will be right back. Just 2 seconds. It's a disaster. I ran out of sparkling water. I need to drink still. Thomas Broadbent says about the current lineup of Breitling, it's designed nicely, priced for the market, priced to keep Breitling going. But for 8 to 10K, is that the best acquisition for collection or for the dollars? That's a very good question. That is a very good question indeed, Thomas. Look, that is the founding philosophy of this channel. Um, I'm here to help you make considered, informed, knowledgeable decisions about your next watch purchase. I'm here to help you um, configure and think more carefully about your collection rather than amassing a particular number of watches. And you always have to think, I think, carefully and consider all the available options in the market, among contemporary watches, but also in the secondary market when it comes to the particular kind of watch you're looking for. We have just, since the beginning of this stream, you have noticed the theme already, right? We looked at a lot of chronographs. Of course, I paid particular attention to Movado because that's a brand that I wanted to highlight. And since Neo came here just to say right before he left that no one cares about Movado, I wanted to double down and talk as much as possible about Movado. So it was partly that, but I was also looking at these examples of vintage chronographs, which actually are very wearable, um, very elegant, very classically designed, and I think still have a very important charm and quite a significant place in anyone's collection, really. And relatively speaking, right, you can genuinely go and get probably after a patient search that might take you a few months, maybe up to a year, you can probably get both the stainless steel triple calendar integrated bracelet Movado watch that we showed, the Astronic HS360, and one of those hand-wound M90 powered vintage chronographs as well. So you can get both for the price of a new Breitling, but the choice is up to you, right? Because again, some people just don't enjoy that journey, right? In this channel, we have many subscribers and many contributors who are very much into that hunt, into that chase. They get as much pleasure from researching about particular models of watches, dipping their toes in the vintage market, finding the right example at the right price point, and then acquiring that watch is only a small step in that large, long quest. And there are some who just don't enjoy that. They want something. They know more or less what they want, and that's an itch that can be scratched in the contemporary market. That's an aspiration they can satisfy by getting a watch at an authorized dealer. And sometimes people are just not into even the feel of a vintage watch, right? They do want a more prominent, more present, heftier watch on their wrist. And for that, obviously, Breitling would be a better option. And Jimmy was reminding us earlier, right? When you get a vintage watch, you should, in fact, be also looking for a watchmaker, for a local watchmaker, ideally, who can, first of all, certify that watch for you, right? Who can take a look at that watch after you buy it to make sure that everything is as described and everything is of original parts, that it is reliable, that it will keep time for some time to come. but also that watchmaker will be your collaborator, right? If you want to collect vintage watches and if you want to be able to wear them and enjoy them over a longer period of time, you need to have a local watchmaker whom you can trust, who has the necessary expertise and experience in recognizing these watches, in servicing these watches, and if necessary, building these watches from the ground up, right? If you are missing parts, for example, they should be able to acquire them for you, so on and so forth. Newbie says, up voted. Thank you, Newbie. I really appreciate you. Thoughts on the Omega Speedmaster TV dial? Justin at Watchbox told me it was released a year or two before Janta's Nautilus. I like it in pics, but like most watches, never tried it on. I think what you have in mind is either one of the two things. It's either Speedmaster 2, right, which is a more kind of tonneau shaped case, I have to say, in my description at least. I'm not going to insist. But there's also a case that they describe as Teutonic, right? Because they were mostly made for the German. And I think you won't be surprised to find this out. Kind of like them. I kind of like them both, but I like what they call the Teutonic a lot more than I like the Speedmaster 2. I really like the way that the bracelet flows into the case. I really like the contrast of those end links with the shape of the case. And since they are considered literally the black sheep of the entire line, I think these Teutonics are even rated less than Speedmaster 2s. You can probably get pretty decent deals on these. I opened up this particular page, Newbie, because I wanted to make sure first that this is what you want. And if it is, in fact, what you had in mind, we can certainly go into Chrono 24 and take a peek at how they're trading in the secondary market as well. And this ties in, of course, with our earlier conversation, both at the lunch break stream and here in the after show about integrated bracelet steel sports watches that are overlooked, but that come actually from the same era as the Janta designs for Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe. Thomas says, the Astronic is bulletproof, beautiful, substantial, horological wonder, great wrist presence. If it moves you, buy it. Yeah, I completely agree. Astronic HS 360 from Movado is a great watch and a great deal to boot. 176,014. Okay. Yeah. These are a little different, but I get what what your friend told you there. Honestly, yeah, I'll stick to my pick, which is not necessarily saying much about this particular dial, but I was never, yeah, I have to be honest, newbie. I was never really into this vertical three register layout for a chronograph. So that's neither here nor there. But I've also only have seen these watches on computer screens. I have not tried, unlike the Teutonic and unlike Speedmaster 2, I've never actually tried these watches on. Um, but they don't really appeal to me because one, they have the automatic movement inside, and two, the dial layout is really not for me. Newbie says, but I like what you brought up, new one on me. Yeah, let's take a look at how they are trending, the Speedmaster Teutonics, because I think these are actually quite a nice deal in the secondary market. Um, let's see, I just want to see one in in an almost impeccable condition, so we really get to um, enjoy what it brings to the table. It has the 861 caliber in it, which is great. Hasselite glass, right? The familiar layout that we are so used to, of course. Right, one just sold basically for 2,500. You see, um, and frankly, again, if I mean, if you already have a Speedmaster in your collection, I'm sure at the right moment, these might be found for even cheaper, and it could be a great grab for a collection of chronographs and for an enthusiast of Speedmasters. This could be an amazing watch. Thomas says, I approve of the Teutonic Omega. Jamie says, this is another watch I had no idea of. Speedy Teutonic, very reasonable in price. Hey, Jimmy, that's what I'm here for. I appreciate it. It really makes me happy when I can actually introduce my audience to a model, to a brand that they weren't familiar with before, especially if it presents value. It makes me even happier. So again, just a small incentive for all you guys to spread the word and share the link, and help us expand this community where there is basically nonstop watch talk, without drama, without any infantile attempts at comedy that try to imitate the pontiff, without any desperate attempts to stir drama. This is what this channel is here for: serious watch talk, sharing of knowledge, participating in the passion of collecting watches, and just expanding our horizons together. I learn something every day from the chat, and And that to me is invaluable. And if I can give that back in some way to the community, that would be for me a job well done. I think the two-tone is actually kind of cool as well, because the watch itself screams 80s so hard, in a kind of high-pitched hair metal kind of way. The two-tone just fits, champagne dial, or even like a lemon dial, right? White subdials, again, gold bezel, gold center links. It kind of fits, because that's what it was. That's what it was made for. And you have one in great condition, right? You can see here at 10 with the moon phase. In either case, I think it just is a very unique execution of Speedmaster that just isn't all that common. And just really, I mean, look at that orange center seconds, right? You know how crazy people are about seeing those seconds hands in the usual Speedmasters, right? The whole provenance of the Ultraman that needs to be, of course, confirmed and matched with a certain period of time to make sure that they're not just service hands or hands that someone replaced. This just looks cool. This is the kind of watch that a horological enthusiast or a Speedmaster militant can wear without abandon and just enjoy himself. Amazing example. Quite a renegade, but why not? Why not? For this kind of price, this is really a great value if you're actually into it. Of course, just to warn you, as far as I can understand, in the two-tone, the center links seem to me from these photos like plated gold rather than solid gold. So if that's a concern for you, stay away from those. But yeah, the stainless steel example at the right price point, I wouldn't hesitate. I would go with the black dial, of course. Pardon me, like something like this. And it's an iteration of a classic that many of us love. Almost immediately recognizable, but something also radically different. Make room for the sheep, folks. Yeah, jump on. The link is still there, Big Mish. I thought you were gonna come back. I thought you were just getting the food. Bird cases. What are my thoughts on Speedmaster 2? Yeah, it's not my thing. That it sometimes presents. For me, Speedmaster 2, unlike these Speedmasters made for the German market that I just showed, the Teutonic, so to speak, these seem like they're neither here nor there, neither fish nor fowl. Um, the way the case is designed and the way it's um, connects to the bracelet, it almost seems like an afterthought. So as much as I actually like the case design, right, which is not actually all that different from that Movado Astronic we considered at the beginning of the show, um, or even from the case of the German market Speedmaster Teutonic, even though that is a more contoured and more carefully designed case, this just seems like it's neither here nor there, right? And I know that it has its own provenance, it has its own place in space exploration. I understand that, but I think I would rather go with the Moonwatch, with some version of the Moonwatch, or if you want to go with something that's a little more of a renegade, I would most certainly go with the German market special, the Teutonic, and that represents an even better value. Thomas says, have a look at the Hoyer yacht timer. I will go right back to that. The orange hand reminds me of the Ultraman. Yes, absolutely. Newbie says, I match my behavior to the environment that I'm in. If I'm in a circus, I'll be a clown. If it is a professional setting, such as here, then I can adapt accordingly. Yeah, well, that's actually great, because I think there is space for both. There's time. There's a time for everything. Let's put it like that. But when you have original in the Pontiff, the imitation kind of becomes really exhausting at some point. But that's just my opinion. Jimmy says, I think you would get a lot of questions at a watch meetup if you wore the Teutonic. Yeah, I think it might attract a certain kind of attention, perhaps not always in a good way, but hey, nothing can beat a watch that you wear confidently. I think that in itself, if you're passionate about it, if you have actually learned about its provenance, how it came about, why it was designed in that particular way, why was it presented in that particular way. I think it's a great conversation piece as well. It's a beautiful aesthetic, great example of an 80s watch, of again an integrated bracelet watch that just can't be categorized in any facile way, right? It's certainly not a Janta design. Although I hesitate now because he has so many designs that he didn't necessarily openly take credit for. So who knows, But it's not a Royal Oak or a Nautilus. It's not your run-of-the-mill Speedmaster. Yet it has the same caliber, same layout, but its own character, and certainly wears so much differently than a Speedmaster and then many other chronographs. Going back to Thomas's question, he was saying, look at Hoya yacht timer. Let's see. Whoa. This is a very, very colorful watch. Of course, we're not looking at the stopwatch, right? Thomas? We're looking at the proper wristwatch version. Wow, this is a rare bird indeed, Thomas. I'm out of words. You'll have to account for this. You'll have to make your case for this. I don't even know. Yeah. I mean, it's a very playful watch. Even in this PVD covered version, and I don't know whether that was done aftermarket. I'm guessing that it was. It really pops out of that dial. I've never seen anything like it. I thought it was one of those regatta timers that both Hodinkee and the Revolution magazine reissued at a given point in time. But I guess I was wrong. There's another variation. Well, give me the specific model number or something. Jimmy says, "Wow, that Tag Heuer is almost Swatch-like." Yeah, it's this one is just a sport stopwatch more than anything. So it's more like a regatta timer or yacht timer. But what I had in mind was this. It's Hodinkee special edition they did. I'm sure of the Skipper that I'm sure is trending for strange, crazy prices by now. But that can sort you aesthetic. The Carrera Skipper, right? Do you guys remember this? So it has that same color scheme, but in just a single subdial that's placed at 9 o'clock. And I love it. I do love this. I'm not sure if I would buy one, but I just like that it's such an oddball that it's not a watch that you can easily categorize. And I actually love the case shape again. That's one of the things that I really appreciate about vintage Hoya and a lot of the reissues that they did, whether it was in collaboration with other with these magazines or not, right? That there's a version, for example, that of the Carrera, so not the Skipper necessarily, that is more of a nautical color scheme and that has two subdials this time. So the regatta timer and a minute track. And I kind of like this one a little better. I think this is a more conventional, slightly more conservative watch that's a little more wearable, at least for my taste, than the limited edition Skipper they did with Hodinkee. This was a limited edition of the Carrera they did with the watch magazine Revolution that's released by Wei-Co. And you can clearly see that there was that inspiration from Hodinkee behind it, at least initially. But it's a more sober watch in a way that still has a playful aspect and that still plays up that nautical theme. Have you seen the Hodinkee Blanc Pain? Oh, by the way, guys, it's I think it's been now 2 days. Thank you for reminding me. even if it's unintentional, Jay. I think it was either yesterday or the day before where I learned that the original designer of the dive watch, and specifically of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, passed away. And Blancpain announced it yesterday. Jean-Jacques Fichter passed away, um, and he was the designer of the original Blancpain 50 Fathoms, which, as you know, is the first modern dive watch by many accounts. It was introduced in 1953, of course. Yeah, that man has a great story, and some of that story is related really beautifully and in great detail in one of those Horological Society of New York lectures. I'll share the link, because why not? We're all here for the uh, same reason, and to expand on our knowledge and passion for wristwatches. And I think that would be great tribute for Jean-Jacques Fichter. Um, for whatever reason, I don't seem to find the link. I promise I will share it before the end of this broadcast, guys. Apologize. Thomas says, God bless. Jimmy says, looks like he led a good life for sure. Rest in peace. J617 says, rest in peace. The GOAT, the greatest of all times. There's one on eBay, Thomas says, about the Regatta Yacht Timer. I will go back to this. And Jay says, have you seen the Hodinkee Blancpain? Yeah, Hodinkee Blancpain 50 Fathoms. The mil spec, I think, actually. I think it was a very interesting watch. And frankly, I was before very much swayed away from this particular watch, the 50 Fathoms, because in the usual dimensions of it, on paper, it sounds gigantic, but actually, even in the 43 millimeters, it wears really well. And this mil-spec limited edition that was produced in collaboration with Hodinkee is, of course, a bathyscaphe, which means that it is a smaller version. It was produced by Blancpain to just 250 units, 300 meters of water-resistant sapphire bezel, luminous bezel, of course, as they have it, that domed sapphire bezel. That's one of the unique pieces of design for 50 Fathoms. It has that moisture indicator, which was part and parcel of the mil-spec Blancpain watches, right? Because when they were issued to a particular diver, it was for that specific mission, and those watches would be returned at the end of the mission. So since there was no individual way of tracking whatever happened to that watch, whether it was in terms of a damage or the moisture somehow making its way to the inside of the watch, that indicator served as a handy way for the quartermaster to actually figure out whether there was a possibility of water and moisture damage before he gave it to the next diver. So quite an amazing watch. Great heritage, of course. Um, it's hard not to get excited about it, right? Even if you don't necessarily go for one yourself. And here it is, alongside two watches that represent that heritage, right? Blancpain 50 fathoms mil spec in a way that was issued in the US, Tornek Rayville, which is how these watches were branded at times in the US, Tornek being the primary authorized dealer and distributor of Blancpain watches at the time. It's a nice piece. The civilian version, original mil spec, had the no radiation dial. Cool. Thomas says the Hoyer I'm referring to is the Hoyer Regatta yacht timer. Let's take a look at that. Is it this, the Lemania one? Yeah, I think so. I think we found it. Is this it, Thomas? I can certainly see, Thomas, the aesthetic that you really like and enjoy. This is a nice design. I really like the case and the bracelet. Can't say the same thing about the bezel and the dial itself, but certainly a great piece of design. Jay, if I can pull up that particular lecture, if you listen to it, you will hear the story. Tornek was basically the U.S. distributor of Blancpain, and there was a moment apparently in the history of Blancpain where they didn't quite have the rights over their own name. So Tornek Rayville was a way for Tornek, the US distributor, to somehow overcome that particular problem for the American market at the very least. So this is the HSNY lecture on the history of Blancpain 50 fathoms. If you find the time at some point, maybe after you finish this live stream, you can take a look at it. And we have about 20 minutes left at this point, maybe 15. So this is a good time. Again, if you haven't done so, please hit the like button, upvote the stream if you have been enjoying this content, if you have been learning from it. It's really a pleasure to have you. I'm really grateful for your presence and support, and I'm really grateful for your support on the Archie Luxury stream as well. If you can share the link with your friends, if you can share the link on other platforms, if you spread the word, that will be of great help to me. Every goal I get at this point on my path to 1,000 subscribers is incredibly valuable to me. And it will help me a great deal in monetizing this channel. Until then, if you have been content, if you appreciate it, you can always consider contributing via PayPal. And my address for that is lordhellespontv@gmail.com, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App, which is $LHVVV, $LHVVV. And if you have any questions for me, if you want me to dedicate a live stream to a question you have, if you want me to make for you a personalized video, you can use the same address as PayPal to send me a message. And with just a nominal contribution, I would be more than happy to prepare something very special for you. So with that being said, we are in the last 15 minutes of our broadcast today. We are in the last stretch, and we were talking about sleepers. We were talking about sleeper brands, contemporary watch brands that have been overlooked for the most part, or vintage brands and models that have been largely undervalued. And we have come up with some great discussion about a lot of vintage chronographs, actually, as it happens, but not limited, certainly. Conversation was not limited to just sure. If you want to take a look at some of that, feel free to check it out. Feel free to rewind whenever you have time. And in the last 10-15 minutes or so, please feel free to send in more questions. If you have a sleeper brand that we have not yet talked about, that we have not yet checked out, that we have not yet considered, please share them as well. Newbie says, speaking of chronos, which would you prefer? The Le Jour chronograph, Paul Newman, with an interesting subdial layout, or the Gevril Tribeca? Of course, the Gevril Tribeca, you guys would know, is basically a replica of the famous Daytona with the exotic dial, the so-called Paul Newman, right? I have not seen the Le Jour chronograph Paul Newman, so I have actually take a look at that. Okay. Let me see. This is the first time I'm seeing the Le Jour. I'm not enamored by the dial layout, I have to be honest. But more than that, I'm wondering about what kind of movement is in these. Okay, it's a Vajou 7765. Honestly, I actually really love the all the colors in the dial. I'll give it that. I actually love the hands. Of course, the Art Deco numerals and design of the two subdials. The orange pop of the center second hand. There's a lot to admire in this watch, and certainly it's much cheaper than how the Gevril Tribeca has been trending more recently. It's at a fraction of Gevril Tribeca. of which the cheapest one here is at almost 8,000 Australian. Yeah, look, I mean, this is not exactly the kind of watch I would go for. I don't really feel for replica watches at this price range. I would rather get a Speedmaster um, than a replica. But yeah, I guess between the two of them, I would get the Tribeca. Jimmy says, I'd rather the Le Jour. I've never seen it before. At least it is an original. Exactly. Right. You can see the inspiration in the subdials. Especially in the choice of the font for the numerals and the layout. Um, but yeah, to me, it has a little more character and originality than the Gevril. Um, so yeah, it has that going for it. I mean, between the two of them, I think I would still take the Gevril, but I would rather not take any of them at all. Thomas says the Le Jour is throwback quirky, which is kind of his style as well. So I'm guessing he likes it. Newbie says, I guess I just want the little squares and the subdials. Yeah, in that case, I think the Le Jour is really nice, right? And it's not trying to be something else. And it has to be, I admire it for that, for sure. Jimmy, have seen many watches tonight that you would probably never see in the wild. Learned quite a bit. Very cool suggestions. Yes, guys. Of course, some of them came from me, but a lot of them came from the chat and from the very engaging and committed viewers and subscribers of this channel. So I really appreciate you all. We're all learning together here. And it's been a great experience for me so far. The few months that I experienced with this channel and the way it has grown it is really moving for me. I have to say this. J617 says, "Fight me dead. The Gevril used to be 3K. Yeah, now it's 8 Australian, which is like what, a little less than 5 in US. Let me see. I'm just gonna go to 24. I don't know why I ended up going to the Australian side. Yeah, that's like the cheapest one is more than 5,000 now, and the full sets almost are 75. It's unbelievable, honestly. Jimmy says, yeah, those Gevril have gotten stupid expensive. Is the Gevril a 7750 movement? I kind of doubt it, Jay. I don't actually know. So let's see if any of these listings actually say anything about the movement. But maybe someone in the chat can enlighten us. No, of course not. It's an ETA 2824. And compared to that, this has a Valjoux 7765. And it is, for a 70s piece, I think it comes in a wonderful condition as well. Really fascinating. Interesting little watch. J617 says, you are the principal of the community. Thank you. Thomas says, you saw watches that were great without costing a kidney. See, this was supposed to be fun. Full on John says, rather get the Tudor Chrono. Yeah, at this point, I would rather get the Tudor Panda at that price range. Why, again, why get a watch that's so desperately trying to be something else when you can get the Tudor Panda, which, yes, of course, it is trying to, um, fulfill a certain, right? Because are trying to get, people are really aspiring to get a Daytona, a Rolex Daytona, but it's just not available to most. So this, to many, is the next best thing, and I think it's a cool watch. It is a cool watch, and if you can get it at the retail price, for sure, it's a decent deal. And Thomas, yes, let's repeat this. You saw watches that were great without costing an arm and a leg or a kidney. This was supposed to be fun. And Full on John says, rather get the Tudor Chrono. And Jay says, most definitely Tudor all day for that money. And Jimmy says, well said, Thomas Broadband. All right. Guys, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Get in your last minute questions and suggestions before we close. But we are almost in that 3 hour mark. And as much as I would like to stay longer, I want to grab a bite before I go to sleep. This has been great. Thank you for supporting me on the Archie Luxury live stream. Thank you for supporting me here. I really appreciate your presence and support. Thank you for encouraging me from the chat. Thank you for asking questions. Thank you for making recommendations, moving on the conversation with your suggestions, with your interjections, with your interventions. This has been a great ride. If you could share the link on other platforms, if you can spread the word, I would really appreciate that. It would help me a great deal as I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers and get this channel monetized. And in the meantime, if you want to support me, if you want to encourage the new and original content that I create, the focused watch talk to which I am committed, you can always consider a PayPal contribution at lordhellespontv@gmail.com, lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I also have a Cash App at $LHVVV, $LHVVV. Full on John says, for the Tudor Black Bay Chrono, just turned one down on the bond strap. Would prefer it on a bracelet and also black dial. Plus, I also got my dad a Black Bay 58 Blue, so I'm broke as fuck. Understandable. But I think it's a good idea to get it on the bracelet. If you can wait for it, and if you can get it for sure, I think you made the wise choice. Thomas says, good night, guys. Good night, Thomas. It was really nice to see you. As always, thank you for contributing to the channel. Jake, thank you. Thank you for being here, my friend. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your support. Not a single Hublot suggested. LOL. Great show, LHV. And Full on John, thumbs up. Thank you so much. It's been a great live stream for me. Newbie, this is the last thing we will pull up today. Tudor Tiger Prince Chrono 79260 Tudor. These have gone up in price. That's unbelievable. in the last few. They used to be really like sold for a song, but nowadays you would be lucky to find one in good condition under 5K, especially in the Panda configuration, of course, Panda or reverse Panda. You see it's going up and up. You have the date with the Cyclops, you have that more vertical layout on the dial for the 3 registers, and really, you know, some of the ones in good condition and as a full set are trending for unbelievable prices. Bezos, peace out, man. Newbie, great show, guys. And for the Tudor Tiger Prince Chrono, Thomas says, yeah, it's also big bucks, as we have just seen. Thank you, guys. I'll see you in the next one. I'll see you tomorrow, certainly on the Archie Luxury Show, but perhaps on an earlier live stream during the day for the lunch break, perhaps again. Until then, upvote on your way out, spread the word, support the channel, you know how. And in either case, I am grateful for your presence, for your questions, for your interventions. You are in your own home. You are the ones who really keep this show going. You are the ones who help this channel to grow. So let's continue to learn together, expand our knowledge, expand our horizons, and build a community that comes together around the passion for wristwatches. Take care, guys. Good night.